All right. If we're all good then, we're going 5, 4, 3, 2.
I'm Scott M. Graves, liberal-minded economic development professional and founder of the Media Project.
And I'm Scott J. Graves, and born and raised Gardner guy. I'm a Gardner City Councilor, and I think I'm probably a little bit more of the conservative bent. How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great. It's good to have you back. You've decided to be my partner in crime for a third time in a row. I guess this is now turning into a habit.
Yeah, we'll have to say the sign behind you. There's no apostrophe on Scott's on purpose. It's Scott's plural.
That's right. That's right.
And sometimes I look at that and I'm like, it looks like it should have an apostrophe, but definitely not.
No. This is our show.
Exactly.
Well, so we're going to dive right in today where we kind of left off in episode 2. We're going to talk a little bit about the last debate between, this is for the Massachusetts State Senate race for our district here in North Central Massachusetts. The candidates are John Cronin. He's a veteran and a Democrat state Senate candidate. And he is running against incumbent Republican Senator Dean Tran. Now, you've had a chance to see the debate.
I did, yeah.
Here's what I think. We'll get in a moment to talk. We'll talk in reverse here. The first third was actually more like a debate based on issues, and then at least 2/3 of this debate ended up becoming kind of a fight where Cronin was really harping on the number of investigations and various senatorial things that Dean Tran has had to experience over the course of his time as our senator. Now,
it wasn't much of a fight. I would say if it was a fight, it was purely one-sided.
Yeah, well,
poor Dean was just backpedaling a little bit, and he was just getting hammered.
It strictly from a debate sort of tactic standpoint, if Senator Tran was looking to defend himself, he didn't do anything succinct enough that would have defended himself. Now that's kind of interesting. Number one. Number two, there's a distinct moment on television, because this did happen on Fitchburg Access Television, where I feel like John Cronin sort of felt the nature of the power the momentum that he was creating, and then got scared by it a little bit.
Well, if you were looking at somebody completely neutral, or you didn't really know who was who there and who was the incumbent, you would say Cronin looked like the incumbent. It almost looked like he thought he was in control. For instance, he would say, "Okay, I'm ready to move on." He'd drink his water and say, "Okay, I'm ready to move on now." Or he'd say, "Oh, this is a yes or no question." It's like he thinks he's the senator already, it seemed. In my opinion, he wasn't giving the senator any respect whatsoever. And I thought that was kind of brazen, if you will. And I don't think it did him any favors, to be honest with you.
Maybe a little sloppy.
It just looked like he thought he was in charge.
Not professional, but also not shaping the argument in a civil and a gentlemanly way.
Well, I'll tell you, coming from an attorney's perspective, it was worse than that. I mean, it was much, and believe me, you know for a fact, and you can look on Facebook, I haven't been any fan of what they allege Tran to have done. But I looked again after I looked at the debate, because I wanted to see, because Cronin was making some serious allegations, right? And I'm like,
yeah,
criminal. He was using the word criminal and really some legal terms. And he says this, he goes, this isn't defamation or anything, because this is all in writing. First of all, if you repeat a defamatory statement, you're guilty of the defamation. Just because somebody said it doesn't mean you're insulated from the defamation. If somebody says defamatory statement and you repeat it, you have now defamed the person as well. But so I looked at there were the October articles in Cape Cod Times, and I think the Telegram and Gazette had one, and there was some newer ones based on that debate. But I couldn't see any developments in the original allegations that they made against Tran. I don't know if you found any, but
You
I
mean
found no development.
yeah, but which investigation you talking about? You talking about the ethics investigation that's been closed? That
All
the
of them.
state,
Well,
um,
the ethics has been closed.
the ethics, as far as I know, the ethics investigation related to his staff and whether or not his office staff at the State House was performing campaign duties. He was found guilty of that, and
Oh,
that
I didn't know that.
and that's the
How
require.
did you find out about that?
I've known about it for some time, so I'm going to guess that I probably read about it in either the Globe or it may have come out in the Commonwealth magazine, but more than likely the Globe at the time in which the case was closed. I mean, I've just known about it for several months, but it didn't come from just nowhere. I mean, I read about, I just can't remember which newspaper I read it. I might have even read about it in the Telegram and Gazette, although I'm not sure.
I did a fairly thorough look into it. I mean, I didn't research it all day or anything like that, but it didn't come up on maybe the first 3 pages of Google. And I
Well, that
tried.
would be pretty germane because that investigation is more than a year old. And why would the state drag it on if, in fact,
The ethics can
real?
take 5 years to do for investigations by law. If
Well,
they
that's
if,
true.
if they issued a decision, I would be surprised. You think you saw that the ethics actually found him that he violated those?
Well, he
ethical
can't
rules?
right now. He can't right now speak in person with any of his state house staff. He can only communicate with them through email, and they can't be in the same office together. They've moved the office. They've separated the office between all of his staff and himself.
I know that happened, but I think that was pending the investigation. I think they did that.
Okay.
I think.
Well, at any rate, that's happening for the poor guy. And then something that I know you and I have followed for at least a year now is this whole idea. And I was actually kind of hoping that they could have talked about this a little bit more because this really definitively did happen. Senator Tran in 2019 and also our Democrat state rep for the 2nd Worcester District, John Zlotnick, attempted to sort of slide in a provision in legislation, so one man in the House and one man in the Senate, that would have given special treatment to a local developer by the name of Greg Lascotti.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing with this and the problem that I had with it is that this would have taken the teeth out of the Cape Cod Commission. So for our listeners right now, that's right. This was legislation they were trying to get passed in both the House and the Senate that was basically a political favor to a man who's local to them, but who would have benefited as a commercial real estate developer in Barnstable County, which is some, I don't know, what is that, 120, 130 miles away in a totally different district.
Exactly.
So it's
Crazy,
just
yeah.
not, I mean, in plain English, it's just not cool. And ever since then, it's that, regardless of party affiliation, it has left a bad taste in my mouth for both our senator and our state rep. It's just wrong. You don't do these things. And then for every minute you're spending on that, what are you not doing for your local constabulary?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about it when I was running for mayor because I think it had a lot to do with local government. I mean, let's face it, our state rep and our local senator is part of our local government here in a small city like Gardner. So, and I was looking at the Citizens United case again, the Supreme Court case, and in how the Supreme Court found that, campaign contributions is a form of freedom of speech, and they do this balancing test, and the concern that the state would have to regulate that type of activity, giving money, millions and millions that the super PACs give to politicians or candidates, is to reduce corruption or the pay to play or the favoritism out there or the appearance of corruption. And here we are. This is the exact thing that happened in this case. Yes. I mean, even if you look at it with the most innocence that you can apply to the situation, it just doesn't give the public any confidence that there's fairness going on, or that it gives the appearance of anything other than impropriety. Just and as we know, appearance is enough when it comes to the conflict of interest law. I mean, the
That's right.
appearance of impropriety is a violation of the law. So that whole thing was, and I've said it many times, I don't know what they were thinking. I really don't know what they were thinking.
Well, and we were trading notes earlier this week, and so I want to bring up, you brought up a good point about the, this was last year, mid-October, so exactly a year ago, when Senator St. Cyr from Barnstable County stood up, and this is that we're going to include in the episode webpage the link on YouTube where he gives a speech. Why don't you recount the because it is relevant to this state senator.
Yeah.
What is it
So-
that was so remarkable about Mr. St. Cyr's
Yeah,
comment?
it was remarkable to me so it was on YouTube. So I'm watching it, and Tran gets up there on the Senate floor and says, "Madam President, I bet you're wondering why the gentleman from Fitchburg has introduced this amendment that has to do with the Cape Cod Commission in Cape Cod, which is 130 miles from my district," or however he put. I'm paraphrasing. So he basically admit, and he goes, "It's because I did it because a constituent asked me to do it," right? So, I mean, pretty much as honest as you can get. I have to hand it to him. I mean, he's
On
like,
the Senate
okay,
floor.
he said that on the Senate floor. So I'm thinking, so Cyr gets up, and I'm like, Cyr is gonna just annihilate him right now because that's Cyr's district now. So it's this unwritten rule, and it makes perfect sense. It's an unwritten rule in the legislature at Beacon Hill that you don't step on somebody else's toes in terms of, you don't come into their district. Like Zlotnick and Tran wouldn't want Cyr coming in from Truro and start doing stuff in Worcester County that would affect their constituents.
And completely more importantly, you or I or any other citizen here wouldn't want somebody from Barnstable County with more money and power than us to make decisions on our commercial real estate.
Yeah, it didn't pass a smell test by any stretch of the imagination. So Cyr gets up and says, and I think he's going to lambast Tran, and he says, he says, and they think they're going to come in here and start telling us what to do. And he's talking about the Lascotti, the developer who made the contribution. I think it was $1,000, the maximum contribution to Tran's campaign, and he hammers the developer as if it's Lascotti's fault that he went to his local senator and said, "Hey, can you help me out on this thing?" It's not up to Lascotti to decide what's moral and what isn't moral from the shoes of a legislature. I mean, for legislator, that's for Tran to decide what he can and can't do. But Cyr gets up there and he proceeds to spend, I don't know if it was 10, 15 minutes, just saying how these rich developers want to come into Cape Cod and change our way of life and everything. It's like, you should be looking at the guy right across the table from you. He's the one that made it happen. It can't happen without the politicians that you're sitting around the table with.
Say something to the effect, I'm more than paraphrasing here. I'm getting this third person, but he essentially said, that, well, we've all had to deal with this from time to time in our positions.
Yes, he goes, yeah, we all have that to deal with. He goes, it's a tough situation. I feel, he said something, I'm paraphrasing. He said something along the lines like, I feel sorry for my colleague from Fitchburg because we are all in that situation. It's a tough thing when somebody comes to you and asks you to do something. So he's basically given Tran a pass and just blaming it all. Literally blamed it all. He just left Tran. At that point, he didn't talk about Tran. From the very beginning, he might have mentioned, I don't even think he mentioned Tran by name, but if he did, it was right at the beginning. You never heard him mention or allude to Tran ever again. It was all the developers.
Yeah, it's to kind of further this a little bit for our listeners. The issue that Scott and I take with this is simply that that number one, the senator himself shouldn't get a pass, but it sort of is indicative of how systemic this kind of flagrant corruption is in the Senate or in any other body of state politics. If it's kind of like, oh, it's happened to all of us. And, but I mean,
It's like accepted
it should-
behavior.
It should be publicly outrageous, and it should be personally outrageous to them that somebody would ask them to do something like this in the first place.
Yeah.
They shouldn't do it.
It should be an easy call saying, hey, we all have to, it should have been something along these lines. This is what the public would want to see the other senator say. We all have that, challenge where people come and constituents ask us to do things, but the line is very bright. It's very clear. We can't just do something that we're not supposed to do just because somebody gave us $1,000 in our campaign fund. So it's, instead of that, he's like, well, it's just, this is one of these things where a developer has a lot of pressure on us. And poor Dean, he got overwhelmed by the pressure from the guy that gave him $1,000. And let's go after the developer. I mean, it was incredible to me. Like, maybe I'm naive, but I couldn't believe that. I really couldn't believe. And it's like, it seemed to me like it was accepted conduct, and we're just going to go after the big bad developers for putting undue pressure on poor Dean Tran.